So we have talked a lot about Russia and its unease about Ukrainian ambition to be a sovereign, independent state, to integrate within Western structures. We might also need to talk about NATO at some point, but focusing on the European Union. Like we hear a lot now from the leading actors within the EU. Charles Michel says that Ukraine is Europe, Ursula von der Leyen, right? I wonder to what extent Ukraine idea of Europe and European unity is compatible actually with the EU that we now have. I see potential for tension there, as Ukraine is fighting for national independence, for sovereignty. Like borders matter. Like there is a bloody war going on between Russia and Ukraine over borders. And yet, until quite recently, most scholars of European integration thought of the EU as a kind of post-sovereign entity in which borders no longer play such an important role, in which sovereign nations no longer play such an important role. How do Ukrainians think about their state, their nationhood, and Europe in that context? And I realize it's difficult to generalize like this.
It's a good question, because I see the tension is there on an analytical, conceptual level. But I think right now Ukrainians don't see that tension, because right now the focus is existential for them.
Yes.
They have to win this war, and not only is Europe and the West helping them, and of course that leads them to identify with Europe as the West as the ones who are going to save their statehood, but in addition, what the type of state that they want to have and they want to save from Russian annihilation is a democracy. It wants to be they want to be a Western state. And they realize that unless they achieve this integration, and if they are left out of the West as a buffer, as a bridge, Russia's ambition will never end, because Russia will come back later. So that's why for them it's existential not only to keep their statehood, but to make sure that their state is in Europe and in the West, in order to send the signal to Russia that they lost, it's over.
So when and how can Ukraine become a full member of the European Union? And is the security question that from my perspective only NATO can adequately address going to hinder Ukraine's European ambition?
It's going to be very complicated because even though there is significant overlap between the EU and NATO, there are still two different organizations, with the obvious difference that the US is a member of NATO, and so the US's opinion there counts more than within Europe. And within Europe, we have different drivers of European integration. So it's going to be very complicated for both the EU and NATO and Ukraine to figure out at what tracks Ukraine is going to go. But I do agree with you that it is essential for Ukraine to be a member of both. It's not going to be enough to be integrated into the EU to stave off any future Russian aggression. For that, they need to be in NATO. On the other hand, the criteria to be in the EU are in many ways more onerous than the criteria to be in NATO. I think the Ukrainian army has proven its capability to be in NATO at this point. On the other hand, the Ukrainian state has some more proving to do, that it can be governed well, that it can tackle corruption, boost the rule of law, etc. So the two processes, I think, will go in parallel. And the goal, of course, is to make them build on each other rather than conflict.